Robert Redford shows who the real bad guys were in Hollywood's golden age. In a recent conversation with Vanity Fair, Robert Redford brought up some of the worst people in Hollywood's golden age, shocking everyone in the room into stunned silence. Someone famous who married off girls who were too young to marry. Someone who was famous for openly racist views on live TV. And even a so-called Queen of the Silver Screen who beat up her co-stars and staff all the time. So bad that one victim ended up in the hospital in serious condition. Which stars did Redford name? More importantly, why did he wait until now, when all of his hair was white, to finally tell such dangerous secrets? Charlie Chaplin, either a funny genius or a man crazy about girls who weren't grown up yet. He was the little guy with the silly smile, bright eyes, and wobbly gait who made everyone laugh on screen. But when the lights went out, Chaplin came back with a different face. He was controlling and obsessed, and he was ready to hurt anyone to get what he wanted. Because of what the press found out about his personal life, people went from admiring him to getting chills. The first one was Mildred Harris. They got married in 1918, when she was only 16 and still in high school in Los Angeles. Why would a teen agree to such a quick marriage? An old classmate wrote in the San Francisco Chronicle decades later that Mildred's parents made her get married to save face when stories spread across the city that she was pregnant with Chaplin. The marriage turned into a tragedy when the baby died soon after birth. People said that the Harris family got a lot of money to keep quiet. But the public did not know that. At the time, the news media said it was an insult to American values. But Chaplin didn't stop. Not long after that, he went looking again and picked Lita Grey, the girl who played a little angel in the movie The Kid. Lita was 12 years old when Chaplin first noticed her. Around age 15, the connection became less clear, and when she was 17, she was rushed into getting married. Lita wrote about a scary event in her autobiography. "I was never thought of as his wife. I was just a supporting character in the real-life movie he directed." Chaplin made her sign strange marriage papers that said she had to wake up at the time he chose, eat from menus he made, and even smile exactly the way he wanted when people came over. After the fact, the Hollywood Reporter called it legalized emotional slavery. The scary stories that went on behind the bedroom door were even worse. A lot of people in court said that Chaplin often put on love plays and made his wife or friends act them out over and over again, like in a movie. Joan Barry, the actress who sued Chaplin in 1943, said something shocking. He made her call him Mr. when they were close, which brought up his character. When Time magazine wrote about the paternity suit between Barry and Chaplin, they called him the love trial of the century, and the New York Post called him a perverted clown. Blood tests didn't prove that Chaplin was the biological father, but everyone in the country had seen the face behind the bowler hat. The next marriages were not any better. One time a huge star, Pete Goddard, said on NBC that Chaplin treated marriage like a movie, and the wife as an extra to make him look good. Next up was Una O'Neill, who was the daughter of the famous writer Eugene O'Neill. Sirona was only 17 years old when she married Chaplin, while Chaplin was 54 years old. Eugene O'Neill was so mad that he stopped loving his daughter and treated her like she was dead. The Los Angeles Times said that the wedding was so romantic that it made everyone in America blush. But Chaplin didn't care. He had 8 children with Una and lived with her until he died. After many years, psychologists and reporters came to a decision. Chaplin couldn't accept a grown woman because he expected her to completely obey him. Charlie Chaplin wanted the kind of love that was easy to get from teenage girls. An editorial in The Guardian wrote, "Chaplin did not want a partner. He wanted a supporting character, a prop in his own play. But the price of that obsession was too steep. Mildred Harris died young in loneliness and addiction. Lita Grey spent the rest of her life in bitterness, forced to write memoirs to make a living. Una O'Neill, though, with Chaplin until the end carried the public label of the teenage bride of the clown. And Chaplin himself, after the Joan Barry trial, along with the fierce anti-communist wave, was shunned by America. He had to leave the country that once celebrated him living in exile in Switzerland in a cold castle overlooking Lake Geneva. All that remained was the immortal smile on screen. But behind it lay a life that made anyone shudder. And while people were still debating that dark truth, Hollywood erupted with another earthquake. This time it wasn't about sex or marriage, but about an ideology so extreme it enraged the entire nation. It was John Wayne, the legendary cowboy face, but also a man who once openly believed that only white supremacy was the truth. John Wayne openly believing in white supremacy. White people are born to lead. That wasn't a far-right politician, but John Wayne in a 1971 Playboy interview. The words fell like a bomb in the middle of Hollywood, where he was hailed as a hero of the Wild West. When the article hit newsstands, millions of readers were stunned, and major networks like NBC and CBS opened their evening news with that sensational excerpt. Critic Roger Ebert in the Chicago Sun-Times even exclaimed, "Wayne has ripped off his own heroic mask to reveal a face full of arrogance and hate." It didn't stop at race. Wayne also hurled his spear at the LGBTQ+ community. At a Beverly Hills press conference when asked about Midnight Cowboy, the 1970 Oscar winner, he said coldly, "It's a sick thing unworthy of mention in the history of cinema." The remark was a bucket of cold water on an art world craving openness. The next day, the Los Angeles Times ran a scathing editorial while critic Pauline Kael sniped on New York radio. Wayne sees the new as a threat, and he turns his fear into open hatred. But the biggest shock exploded at the 1973 Oscars when Sachin Littlefeather refused Marlon Brando's award to protest Hollywood's treatment of Native Americans. The audience fell silent. Backstage, John Wayne lost his temper. According to producer Howard W. Koh's recollection published in Variety, Wayne tried to storm the stage to drag Littlefeather off. 6 security guards had to hold him back while he struggled and growled, "I'll pull her down with these hands." A humiliating scene nearly unfolded live, threatening to turn the Oscars into chaos. After that, the image of America's hero collapsed quickly. Young filmmakers in Hollywood publicly announced boycotts. Many major projects were scrapped for fear of backlash if Wayne appeared on the streets of San Francisco. Banners reading "John Wayne doesn't represent us" appeared at protests. The man once hailed as a national hero was now seen as a symbol of rancor and division. But Hollywood has never lacked darkness. If John Wayne sowed outrage with barbed words, Bette Davis, a queen of the silver screen, terrified sets with her authoritarian streak and refined cruelty toward those around her. And that was when the public truly understood that ruthlessness in Hollywood was not only in men's hands. Bette Davis, the screen queen, who frightened entire crews with a taste for violence. Hollywood once crowned Bette Davis the queen of cinema, a woman whose piercing eyes could set the screen ablaze. But those who worked with her knew those eyes weren't only for acting. They signaled sudden fits of rage sparks that set off explosions that kept crews living in fear. During the production of Mr. Skington in 1944, the air at Warner Brothers was thick with tension. Any crew member could become a victim of Davis. Harry M. Lan, a backstage assistant, recounted in a later published memoir that for accidentally tearing a dress she wore in a scene, Davis yanked his hair and smashed a prop cane onto his shoulder. The injury sent M. Lan to the hospital for 2 weeks. Yet the whole incident was buried after Davis paid $5,000 to force him to sign a non-disclosure. Violence seemed to be a strange preference of Davis. George Hamilton, a lighting technician at Warner Brothers, admitted in The Hollywood Reporter that she threw a glass ashtray at him because the light hit her face too harshly. He needed 4 stitches, but later a studio lawyer handed him an envelope of cash with a note. "Consider it an occupational accident." Davis also liked to humiliate co-stars. Miriam Hopkins, a famed actress of the time, recalled bitterly, "Whenever I had to shoot tussling scenes with Davis, I always left the set with real bruises." Davis would deliberately squeeze tightly claw at a co-star's arm, then turn her back as if it were part of the craft. That habit of cruelty made Davis enemies everywhere. From director Vincent Sherman to makeup artist Percy Westmore, everyone had a reason to resent her. Whispered on the lot was that at Warner Brothers, nothing was more frightening than the echo of Davis's high heels down the hallway. And then there was her bitter feud with Joan Crawford. If Crawford was known for elegant poise and cold calculation, Davis was a storm no one could control. They clashed constantly on the set of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane in 1962. Rumor had it Davis kicked Crawford square in the knee during a scene, leaving Crawford on crutches for weeks. In response, Crawford secretly added weights to props, forcing Davis to drag herself across the set. The war between these powerful women turned Hollywood itself into a battlefield of public opinion. The final question remains, what end did David beat? She still had Oscars, still wore the wolo of a screen queen. But in her final years, she sat in a chilly Paris apartment, her only companion, a giant pair of dark glasses that hid the eyes that once terrified the world. Those she had mistreated never returned, and the press mentioned her more as a symbol of cruelty than an artistic legend. The story of B. Davis is enough to make one shudder, but it gets worse when it comes to her archenemy, Joan Crawford. If Davis sowed fear with explosive violence, Crawford planted nightmares right inside her own family, where the children lived each day in a luxurious prison. Joan Crawford, the cruel mother condemned by her own child in Mommy Dearest. On the red carpet, Joan Crawford always appeared as the model woman admired worldwide: perfectly coiffed hair, dazzling gowns, a gentle smile, and sweet words for fans. The Los Angeles Times once called her Hollywood's mother, as she was often seen holding the hands of her pretty adopted children, posing for cameras like a happy family. Yet once the doors of the Brentwood mansion closed, behind those glamorous photos lay an inescapable hell. Christina Crawford, the eldest adopted daughter, exposed it all in the 1978 memoir Mommy Dearest. She described her childhood as nothing but fear and bruises. Every small mistake demanded a heavy price for merely hanging a dress in the wrong place. Christina was beaten mercilessly with metal hangers. Some nights she was dragged from bed at 3 in the morning, forced to kneel on freezing tile and scrub every tiny stain with a toothbrush. A former maid, Mary Smith, confirmed to the Los Angeles Times, "We heard crying so often it became a familiar part of the house." Crawford had a pathological obsession with cleanliness. The children had to scrub the pool over a few fallen leaves. Once she made her young adopted son dive in at night to set an example for his sisters. When the alcohol hit, sudden rages flared. Christina recalled, "One day she ripped the curtains down, screamed that the light was dirtying the room, then slapped me as if I were to blame." It was clear that Crawford was cruel even at work. The team of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane was always on edge because of her fight with Betty Davis. When Davis had to pull Crawford across the floor, a backstage worker told The Hollywood Reporter that Crawford hid iron weights in her clothes. This caused Davis back pain for weeks. At the 1963 Oscars, Crawford planned ahead of time with Anne Braftoft to take the award on her behalf. This was the highest level of planning. On the night that B. Davis wanted to be recognized, Crawford walked onto the stage with a smile on her face and cradled the statuette while her rival looked at her with anger. The press said that AD was the worst backstabber in the history of the Oscars. Crawford also didn't think twice about using love as a tool. After having a loud affair with Clark Gable, there were reports that she was seeing Howard Hughes. A lot of articles suggested that Crawford used love to boost her status in Hollywood, and she was ready to hurt other people to get ahead. The people still saw Crawford as a strong star and a stunningly beautiful woman. Her kids had a terrible time with her. In later appearances, Christina and Christopher Crawford spoke out against their mother in very bad ways. Christina lied and said, "The world saw a queen. I saw a tyrant in an evening gown." In her last years, Crawford lived alone in a small apartment in New York. Her friends avoided her, and she didn't talk to her kids. Her death in 1977 left behind a great body of work in movies, and the dark moniker, Hollywood's cruelest mother. People thought Crawford was the best star ever. For her kids, she was a symbol of being mean and controlling. The world fell in love with Hollywood's main man as well. But those beautiful eyes held secrets that made the business world shake. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn, the cool leading man who was caught with young girls. Errol Flynn used to be the picture of charm. The handsome Robin Hood from the 1938 movie, the romantic hero of Captain Blood. The face that stirred up millions of dreams. But that glitz was just a cover. Because of it, he was at the center of one of Hollywood's most famous stories involving relationships with girls who were not his own. In October 1942, Flynn was charged with molesting two young girls, Betty Hansen, who was only 17, and Peggy Satterley, who was only 15. This caused a huge uproar in Los Angeles. The press said it was the most important hearing in history. The Los Angeles Times wrote that the courtroom was packed with reporters, with hundreds squeezing together to get a picture of Flynn as he walked in with a half-smile that seemed rebellious. America shook when people testified. Peggy said Flynn got her to go on a yacht off the coast of Santa Catalina by giving her drink until she couldn't say no. Betty talked about a room at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel where she said he abused her. It was so clear that people were shocked, and the New York Daily News ran the story Robin Hood turns killer. What made people even more angry was how Flynn got away with his crimes. A very large fee was paid to star defense lawyer Jerry Gisler, who was known as the fixer of Hollywood stars. There were rumors that Warner Brothers and Flynn paid a lot of money to keep witnesses quiet and change the jury's mind. Flynn was found not guilty in the end, but in the public's eyes, a laugh didn't wash away the stain. After his trial, Flynn continued to live a reckless life, as if he were making fun of the public's opinion. His home on Mulholland Drive turned into a place for fun. Every night there were parties, drugs, drink, and lots of young girls. A guitarist said that Flynn made him play the piano for 12 hours straight and threatened to throw him into the pool if he stopped. A server said that girls younger than 18 would show up at parties. Many of them were brought in under the guise of screen tests, but the host really just wanted to please them. Flynn also had strange thrills. In the words of friends, it was the syndrome of never saying no to happiness. He said he had tried everything, from drinking alcohol that had been spiked with drugs to playing sexual games that even his best friends found creepy. Some satirical publications called him the gentleman without limits. The bill was due early. Flynn's health got worse. His skin was wrinkly and his teeth fell out, aged so fast that Dr. Thomas Nguchi, who examined him after he died in 1959 in Vancouver, exclaimed, "His body resembled that of an 85-year-old, exhausted by illness, though Flynn was only 50. Dashing aura, seductive eyes, and legendary roles couldn't hide the truth. Errol Flynn destroyed himself in a whirlpool of pleasure and scandal. From a celebrated star, he became a stark example of the terrible price of fame and indulgence. But Hollywood wasn't only about libertines spiraling into excess. There were also men hailed as America's ideal father, who once the home doors shut turned into nightmares for their own children. And that name was Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby, the strict father who punished his children with whips and cold water. To the American public, Bing Crosby was the face of every holiday season. His rendition of White Christmas became immortal, a song that carried warmth and peace into millions of homes. The image of a gentle father by the fireplace, his deep baritone like a blessing, turned into a cultural symbol. But once the spotlight dimmed and the doors of his Hillsborough mansion closed, Crosby revealed an entirely different man. For his children, childhood was not a lullaby sung by their famous father. It was a chain of brutal discipline. They recalled a leather whip that always hung in the living room. Just the sound of it being lifted was enough to strike terror. Crosby ran his household like a military barracks. Meals had to be eaten in perfect posture. Shoes lined up in exact rows. Any mistake was punished immediately. Sometimes the punishment became chilling torture. The children had their heads shoved into basins of freezing water until their lips turned blue, then yanked back out as if it were nothing more than an exercise in building character. Outsiders saw it too. A former maid told the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner that she was horrified when she found young Philip trembling lips pale after one of these lessons. Crosby, she said, walked away calmly, as if it were no more unusual than sweeping the floor. And beyond the family walls, Crosby was not much softer. In the recording studios of Hollywood, he was infamous for perfectionism, so ruthless that one tiny error could make him storm out, leaving entire crews to waste a day's work. An audio technician remembered on NBC News how Crosby once hurled a microphone to the ground, furious at how his own voice sounded in the headphones. The price of such severity was written in the fate of his family. His eldest son, Gary Crosby, shattered the illusion in his 1983 memoir, Going My Own Way. The book stripped bare the horror of his upbringing, the suffocating silence when their father entered the room with a whip, the winter mornings that began with ice-cold water poured over their heads, the way the children lied at each other with wide eyes but dared not cry. The revelations shocked the nation, exposing the truth behind the perfect family image Americans had believed for decades. Tragedy followed tragedy. Two of Crosby's four sons fell into deep depression. One took his own life in a lonely apartment. Another died young, torn apart by inner torment. They carried wounds that never healed, leaving a haunting question. How could the voice that once brought peace to the world have sown such darkness in his own bloodline? Music critic Leonard Feather wrote in Rolling Stone, "Bing Crosby made millions believe in the miracle of Christmas. But for his family, Christmas was nothing more than the memory of a beating." When the truth finally surfaced, audiences were stunned to realize that even the sweetest melodies can mask a heart of ice. And yet this was not the end. Because Hollywood still had another name. A man who seemed harmless with his friendly smile and dance steps that made history. But behind that charm lay secrets that would make anyone shudder. That man was Gene Kelly. Gene Kelly turning Debbie Reynolds into a victim of ruthless perfectionism. When Gene Kelly danced in Singing in the Rain, the world was dazzled by his radiant smile and romantic grace. But behind the curtain, hidden in the shadows of those iconic dance numbers, was a very different Gene Kelly. He was merciless, obsessed with perfection, and ready to sacrifice his co-stars just to carve the flawless image he demanded on screen. Debbie Reynolds was only 19 when she stepped onto the MGM set, her eyes sparkling with dreams of Hollywood glory. But the dream quickly dissolved into a nightmare. Kelly pushed her through rehearsals so brutal that her feet swelled, her toes bled, and the rehearsal floor was littered with tissues soaked in tears. Many nights she collapsed under the piano, too exhausted to stand, while the rest of the crew carried on helpless as they watched her suffer in silence. Years later, Variety and The Hollywood Reporter both described the set as nothing short of a boot camp, disguised as a movie production, and Debbie was not his only victim. Esther Williams revealed in her memoir that Kelly's obsession with his own image bordered on the absurd. He forced her to stoop during scenes so that he would always appear taller and more commanding. For Kelly, art meant absolute control, and anyone who threatened that control would pay the price. On set, Gene Kelly ruled like a tyrant. He demanded retakes again and again, sometimes dozens of times for the smallest imperfection. A glance that missed its mark, a step that landed half a beat off, could send the entire crew back to square one. Choreographers, cameramen, even lighting technicians admitted the air was suffocating, as if they were working under military command. The Los Angeles Times once ran an editorial that called him a genius artist who also turned film sets into hell. But Kelly's scandals went beyond artistry. In the late 1970s, The Guardian raised suspicions about his alleged ties to armed groups in Ireland. Rumors spread that Kelly once met Cathal Goulding in a New York pub, where envelopes of cash were exchanged for special purposes. His widow, Patricia Ward Kelly, later denied the accusations, insisting her husband only cherished Irish heritage and never touched violence. Yet Hollywood never forgot. The cloud of suspicion lingered, casting a shadow over his legacy. The cost of his cruelty and obsession was isolation. Co-stars began to refuse collaboration. Some choreographers swore never to return to his productions. Audiences still adored him on screen, but within the industry, he was branded as a dictator disguised as an artist. For the public, Gene Kelly will forever be the immortal smile dancing through the rain. But for those who stood beside him, he was a man who turned art into an excuse for torment. A man who transformed movie sets into fields of fear. And Hollywood has never lacked such faces. If Kelly stunned audiences with the cruelty hidden behind his dance steps, Sean Connery would soon shock the world by shattering the image of the gentleman spy to reveal a cold soul and secrets just as dark, just as brutal. Sean Connery declaring that men had the right to strike women. In the history of cinema, few left an imprint as powerful as Sean Connery. With his tailored suits, steady stride, and magnetic gaze, he became the irreplaceable face of James Bond. The image of Agent 007 catapulted Connery to global stardom, turning him into an icon of elegance and strength. Yet behind the glittering success, he carved scars into history that sparked outrage across the world. It began with a shocking Playboy interview in 1965. When asked about male-female relationships, Connery calmly declared that men had the right to hit women in certain situations. At first, some dismissed it as a slip of the tongue. But decades later, during a live conversation with Barbara Walters on American television, Connery doubled down. He reaffirmed his stance without hesitation. The studio fell silent. Millions of viewers erupted in anger. From that moment on, his gentlemanly image became inseparable from the label of violence and chauvinism. His temper did not stop, as Connery was notorious for a volatile working style, quick to clash with colleagues. One infamous example came during the filming of The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in Prague in 2003. The Independent reported a fierce shouting match between Connery and director Stephen Norrington. The tension escalated so dangerously that the crew feared an all-out brawl might break out on set. The film flopped disastrously and Norrington quit directing altogether. Many believed that the crushing pressure from Connery was the final straw. Connery's controlling streak was teached far barren directors. He was known for forcing crews into endless retakes over the smallest details. Journalists, too, became victims of his temper. A Daily Mail staffer once recalled a suffocating press conference where Connery stormed out mid-session simply because someone asked about his marriage. That coldness made colleagues tread carefully, knowing a single misstep could ignite his fury. All of this painted a portrait not just of a movie star, but of a man hardened by a brutal upbringing. Connery grew up in post-war Scotland, where domestic violence was often normalized. But bringing those beliefs into Hollywood exacted a heavy toll. The public was divided, his reputation forever tinged by controversy. His legacy is forever shadowed by conservatism and cruelty. Sean Connery stands as a stark paradox of Hollywood. A man celebrated as a global icon, yet condemned by generations for the very words and actions that revealed his darker truth. And just as the storm around Connery left audiences reeling, another name emerged: Steve McQueen, the rebel star who turned petty revenge into a pastime. So tang it made even Hollywood itself shudder. Steve McQueen, the king of cool with vicious acts of revenge. Working with McQueen was like living next to a time bomb, never knowing when it would go off. A colleague once exclaimed this when recalling the time spent collaborating with Steve McQueen. Because behind those defiant blue eyes and that roguish charm on screen, McQueen was a ruthless man ready to use bizarre acts of revenge to satisfy his jealous ego. When filming The Towering Inferno in 1974, McQueen not only demanded equal billing with Paul Newman, but even turned the counting of dialogue lines into a battle. He would sit for hours with the script red pen in hand, crossing out lines to ensure he never had fewer words than Newman. The moment he spotted any imbalance, McQueen exploded with rage, slammed the table and demanded reshoots, no matter how exhausted the crew was. The Hollywood Reporter once wrote that the atmosphere on set was so suffocating that many crew members had to step outside just to breathe. That pettiness spilled into his personal life. James Garner, star of The Rockford Files, once became the target of McQueen's jealousy simply for being cast in Grand Prix. One night, Garner discovered his balcony had been defiled by a vile prank. Friends in the industry swore that a drunken McQueen had done it himself to humiliate his rival. And it was not the only time. Many claimed McQueen often sent cronies to sabotage the cars of stars he despised, slashing tires or scratching paintwork, all to satisfy his thirst for revenge. In love, McQueen swed even greater fear. Ali McGraw, his second wife, described their years together as a test of endurance. She never knew whether the day would end peacefully or descend into violence. Close friends revealed McQueen's paranoia ran so deep, he hired men to tail his wife, suspicious of every phone call, every meeting. That obsessive control drove Ali to flee to friends' houses time and again, desperate for temporary refuge. Not only his family, but directors also bore the brunt of his cruelty. Peter Yates, director of Bullitt, admitted McQueen caused him countless sleepless nights with unreasonable demands, changing scenes, altering scripts, forcing co-stars through dozens of retakes. Sam Peckinpah, who worked with McQueen on The Getaway, bitterly confessed he had never met an actor who treated the film set as a dumping ground for all his personal rage more than McQueen. The result was a Hollywood that both revered and feared him. He remained a box office magnet, but most colleagues saw him as a rebel with the face of an angel and the heart of a devil. His early death at 50 from choir did not erase these stories. On the contrary, they became proof that behind the glamorous image of cool was a man so cruel he could turn every relationship into a battlefield. After McQueen, Hollywood would face another notorious figure, a star who spread chaos and fear in her own way. Faye Dunaway was the actress who made both colleagues and staff tremble before her tyranny and sudden fits of rage. Faye Dunaway, the actress who turned film sets into battlefields. Faye Dunaway was once the very symbol of Hollywood beauty and talent. After Bonnie and Clyde 1967 and Chinatown 1974, she was hailed as the queen of the silver screen, a star capable of turning every role into a classic. But within the film industry, the mention of Dunaway did not bring to mind glamour. Instead, it evoked chaos, tension, and the fear she instilled in everyone who worked with her. In 1981, while filming Mommy Dearest, a movie inspired by the persona of Joan Crawford Dunaway transformed the set into a true battlefield. During one scene, she suddenly slapped her co-star Rana Alda hard across the face. The slap was not in the script. It left a red mark that lingered for hours, and the trauma haunted Alda for years. She later recalled it on a local TV program. That moment wasn't acting anymore. It was a real explosion from FA, a cruelty completely out of control. The Los Angeles Times immediately reported on the incident, calling it an accident that froze the entire crew in place. But it was not only her fellow actors who suffered. Crew members also became victims. A lighting technician told The Hollywood Reporter that he once had an ashtray hurled directly at his head, requiring several stitches. The reason the lighting wasn't angled the way Dunaway wanted. After that, the producers hung a massive sign outside the set reading "Absolute Silence," a desperate attempt to reduce the chances of triggering her fury. Whispered among the crew was the phrase, "Today is the day Faye erupts." The chaos extended beyond work. In her personal life, Dunaway's relatives described her as quick-tempered and prone to sudden outbursts. Her rages turned dinners into tense rituals where children and staff sat in fearful silence, waiting for the storm to pass. The New York Post once ran a shocking story alleging Dunaway had bizarre backstage habits, including leaving waste in her dressing room, an almost unbelievable act, yet one whispered across Broadway. The price came swiftly. In 1994, she was dismissed from the stage production of Sunset Boulevard, one of the most anticipated theater projects of the time. Director Andrew Lloyd Webber bluntly told the press, "She is a danger to the entire company." His words marked the end of Dunaway's stage career and cemented her reputation as a walking nightmare in Hollywood. Dunaway had once been an icon of beauty, but her authoritarian behavior, violent outbursts, and disturbing habits turned the public against her. She was no longer remembered as a star, but as the embodiment of arrogance and cruelty. And just as audiences were still reeling from the chaos Dunaway left behind, another Hollywood titan shook the industry to its core. Kirk Douglas, the heroic face of classic cinema, would see his image collapse entirely under the weight of far darker secrets. Kirk Douglas accused of abusing Natalie Wood. Kirk Douglas was once an untouchable monument of Hollywood. With Spartacus and a string of 1950s blockbusters, he was hailed as the Man of Steel on screen, a hero in the imaginations of millions of fans. But behind the glow of fame lay a chain of dark secrets, accusations, and rumors that forever shattered that heroic image. The mask was ripped away in 2018 when Lana Wood, Natalie Wood's younger sister, published her memoir. She alleged that Douglas had once crossed the line with Natalie when she was still too young and innocent. The horrifying revelation reported by The Hollywood Reporter sent shockwaves through Hollywood. The headline screamed "Spartacus hero backstage predator." Although Douglas had already died before the story spread widely, his name became forever linked to one of the most painful stains in Hollywood history. But that was not the only shadow. In 1949, Los Angeles was shaken by the mysterious disappearance of actress Jean Spangler. Inside her abandoned handbag, Police found a half-written note. "Kirk, I'll meet you at—" and then it trailed off. Both the Los Angeles Examiner and Variety hinted at Kirk Douglas since he had been filming near the spot where Spangler vanished. No evidence was ever produced, and the case remains unsolved. But the cloud of suspicion followed Douglas throughout his career like a curse that could never be erased. Beyond that, Douglas was infamous for his womanizing to the point of obsession. Radio columnist Hato R. once mocked him on air. If Hollywood gave an Oscar for the number of young actresses seduced, Kirk would walk away with the statue. At lavish Beverly Hills parties, Douglas often appeared with a string of up-and-coming starlets, many barely out of their teens. Once the flashbulbs dimmed, they were discarded, leaving behind broken hearts and scandals that never made the headlines. Witnesses also spoke of his cruelty on set. He would force female co-stars to shoot intimate scenes dozens of times, ignoring their tearful pleas for rest. A makeup artist speaking anonymously to The Hollywood Reporter said Douglas often humiliated women in front of the entire crew, using vicious words just to assert his dominance. Some even claimed he used his power to end the career of a young actress after she rejected his private invitation. All of this created a double-portrait Spartacus, the noble hero on screen. But in real life, a man consumed by shadows of ambition, desire, and cruelty. Douglas died at the age of 103, leaving behind a vast cinematic legacy, but also unanswered questions that Hollywood will never be able to fully resolve. Thus, from a screen hero, Douglas became a name forever chained to whispers and lingering rumors. And just as the public continued to argue over his legacy, another American icon stepped into the spotlight, revealing a side that stunned audiences. That name was Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball, the sitcom queen who disdained others. In 1951, when I Love Lucy officially aired on CBS America, was immediately conquered by the image of a cheerful, humorous, and lively woman portrayed by Lucille Ball. More than 3 decades later, the series is still considered a monument of television. But during that very period behind the stage, lights, those who worked with her, witnessed a completely different person. Arrogant, ruthless, and so disdainful it was hard to believe. Colleagues at CBS often called Lucille the Ice Queen. On set, she did not hesitate to turn the smallest mistakes into excuses for outbursts. A lighting technician told The Hollywood Reporter that just because a spotlight was not adjusted correctly, Lucille threw a cup of hot coffee onto the desk, nearly hitting someone nearby. On another occasion, when a young assistant dropped a stack of scripts, she immediately picked them up, hurled them back into his face, and coldly buried him in the dead silence of the entire crew. Journalist Earl Wilson later brought the incident to the New York Post, leaving the public stunned at the stark difference between the cheerful Lucy on screen and the harsh Lucille in real life. Even in her personal life, her authoritarian nature spread fear. Daisy Arnaz, her famous husband, often left home to escape her sudden rages. Family dinners often ended with the sound of dishes shattering simply because her children dared to look at her without permission. A former maid revealed to the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner that the atmosphere in Lucille's mansion was always like a performance where she was the only star, and everyone else were silent spectators. That coldness even extended into public spaces. The New York Times once published a flight attendant story about a flight from New York to Los Angeles, when Lucille absolutely refused to speak directly to the crew. She only gestured for her assistant to communicate, as if talking to a flight attendant would diminish her status. The story spread quickly, turning Ball into a symbol of arrogance among America's television stars. The double-sided image of Lucille Ball was thus carved into Hollywood's memory. On one side, the immortal smile that made a nation laugh, and on the other, the darkness of contempt and cruelty that terrified her family and colleagues. Mickey Rooney. From national child prodigy to notorious debauchee, in the 1930s and 1940s, Mickey Rooney was praised as MGM's national treasure child. With his bright face, mischievous eyes, and natural acting, he became the child star adored across America. But that youthful glory was quickly destroyed by Rooney himself. As an adult, he was no longer the innocent boy on screen, but a depraved, ruthless man whose name became infamous in Hollywood. Rooney's love life was the clearest proof of that chaos. He went through 8 marriages, including one with Ava Gardner, once the most dazzling star of her era. In her memoir, Gardner wrote bluntly, "He treated women as nothing more than entertainment." Variety once mocked him with a bitter headline, "Mickey Rooney changes wives like shirts." Behind the constant turnover were not just fragile romances, but also a trail of damage left for the women who crossed his path, many of whom left Hollywood in humiliation, stripped of both their careers and their dignity. But more ruthless still were Rooney's actions toward young actresses chasing their dreams. For years his name was linked with rumors of the casting couch. Betty Kelly, a newcomer just starting out, told the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner that she was promised a role in an MGM film only to be pulled into a private room by Rooney and given a condition for the part. MGM at the time did everything to bury the truth, but within the industry, it was an open secret known by everyone, but spoken by no one. Rooney also enjoyed flaunting his own depravity. At a lavish party at the Beverly Hills Hotel in front of dozens of guests, he raised his glass and laughed, boasting, "I've slept with more women than roles I've ever played." The room fell silent, but the next day, Variety wasted no chance to mock him, calling him Hollywood's lost clown. His shameless bragging not only exposed his downfall, but revealed how he treated her hurting women as nothing more than entertainment. In his private life, Rooney's selfishness and cruelty left heavy scars. He squandered his fortune on gambling parties and fleeting affairs, leaving his family drowning in debt. One stepchild told the Los Angeles Times that their childhood was nothing more than watching their father gamble through the night, then come home drunk, screaming, smashing things. From the child prodigy once beloved by America, Rooney became a symbol of debauchery and decay. And when Robert Redford later revealed these secrets, he wanted to emphasize that Hollywood's golden age was never only about glamour, but was also filled with dark corners that made later generations shudder. So after everything, the secrets Robert Redford revealed show us a Hollywood that was never only glitter and glory, but one packed with darkness, manipulation, and tragedies that make later generations shudder. The legends once worshipped as idols, once unmasked, appear as demons dressed in stardom. Which of these names shocked you the most? And how many more dark truths are still being hidden behind Hollywood's dazzling wings? Leave a comment below so we can talk it over together. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next videos.